Porn in Japan by Cherry Blossom Life. Porn in Japan. The best houses do not exhibit the women in cages. The Nightless City, or the History of the Yoshiwara Yukwaku, 1899 report on a red light district in Japan. From Andrea Dworkin's book, Pornography. Something has happened to the women of Japan. I am not Japanese, but having lived in Japan for 9 years now, I do find myself asking questions. What is their unwritten herstory? In Europe and America, the witch craze has kept women silent and cowering for centuries until the present day. In China, it was foot binding. In other countries, it has been FGM, female genital mutilation. In India, it is widow burning. Western psychiatry, lobotomies, gynecology, sexual torture and hysterectomies, and clitoridectomies have been exported abroad. I don't need to keep listing the atrocities against women. What has happened to the women of Japan? I caught myself wondering one day as I looked around. Something has happened here. What is it? The women of Japan, especially the women of Okinawa, were hit hard during the Second World War when local governments set up brothels to serve the American soldiers. By 1945, there were 70,000 women in brothels designated specifically for soldiers. And let's not forget the mass suicide of women at the cliffs of Marpi, who all jumped to their deaths upon hearing that Japan had been defeated and they were being invaded. So there is a history of colonization that can't be ignored. I don't mean to draw attention away from the crimes that Japanese men have committed against women in China, Korea, and elsewhere, but today I just want to talk about Japanese women. I believe it's the pornography that has killed the spirit here. Japanese porn. While Japan has no monopoly on porn, the porn produced here seems to be, how can I put it? Well, read on. When I was attacked in Japan 3 years ago, it was the strangest, most bizarre, sadistic incident that I literally don't have the words for. I've talked and written a lot in a general sense about what took place, but I haven't told anyone what really went on. And I don't think I ever will. It was based on pain and torture. It tipped me over the edge. I began searching on the internet for clues of what had happened to me. I wanted to know what was behind the attack for it to have happened in that particular way, to have taken that particular form. I found Japanese porn. Seeing some photographic images brought a few things to light and answered some questions. I found Japanese porn to be very specific. I don't watch porn, but I was shown it in college. I have an idea of what is out there today. But when Andrea Dworkin speaks of that Asian woman hanging from a tree, I know that she's talking about Japanese women. She's talking about a form of BDSM porn that originated in Japan and involves rope bondage. There's something specific, definitive, identifiable, and chilling about Japanese porn. Japanese women have managed to organize against pornography politically. An organization called the Women's Action Group began a protest against sports papers in 1987. Quote, using the slogan, "Rush hour is porno hour," referring to the fact that on crowded trains during rush hours, male commuters often read sports newspapers which contain explicitly pornographic images. From Japanese women, New Feminist Perspectives on the Past, Present, and Future, edited by Kumiko Fujimura Fansalo. Close quote. Another organization of Japanese housewives fought successfully against the vending machines which sold porn on the streets during the 1980s. Kumiko Fujimura Fansalo, the Japanese editor of Japanese Women, New Feminist Perspectives on the Past, Present, and Future, draws a clear second-wave feminist link between pornography and violence against women. I admire her work. The example she cites is interesting from a radfem point of view because it involves a prostitute killing a John. Quote, the theme of pornography in comics, videos, and advertising is the use of the nude or partly nude female body or dissociated parts of female bodies. Depictions of women bound, beaten, and raped are crude and highly suggestive. Apologists for pornography emphasize that it is not reality but rather fantasy, not fact but fiction. The death of a John during a struggle with a prostitute in a hotel room in the Ikebukuro section of Tokyo in 1987, after he filmed her with his video camera, exemplifies the link between pornography and sexual crimes, the symbiosis of prostitution and pornography, and the difficulty of drawing a clear line between fiction and fact. While verbally abusing and physically torturing the woman, the man forced her to repeat after him like a parrot. A woman's vagina is a man's public toilet. Fearing for her life, the woman tried to break loose. They fought, and as a result, he died. The film and tape recording made by the dead man were proof enough of the unequal power between the prostitute and the man who paid for her, yet the woman was arrested on charges of murder. Although the charges were later reduced to excessive defense, that she was prosecuted at all is a clear indication of society's insistence that all women fulfill the passive, objectified role presented in pornography and advertising. The incident is notable for several recurring characteristics. 1. In most instances of prostitution, there is coercion. 2. Pornography, claimed to be harmless fantasy, is based on the negation of women's existence as human beings. 3. The mass media that reports such incidents are owned by men. Had the incident resulted in the death of the prostitute, the pornographic film and tape would have been enjoyed and judged by men to have been a fabrication, and the newspapers would simply have reported that a woman had been found dead in a hotel room. Close quote. She then goes on to describe recorded incidences of men and high school boys who acted out their pornographic fantasies of killing women in real life, resulting in real dead women. None of the above is new or surprising to radfems. Radical feminists are now able to articulate the extent to which the pornography phenomenon exists, and we know, thanks to Mary Daly, that women needed to find the words to name what was happening. Dworkin used the tool of naming to describe what porn was, and feminists began seriously critiquing it. I'm grateful to Gail Dines for writing Pornland because it brought me up to date on the kind of porn being produced in the US and UK. But what I'm trying to say, I think, is that the Japanese have taken the creativity of patriarchal necrophilia to another level, because there is just so much of the shit here. It's hard to put into words the way that Japanese porn draws a parallel and a link between female sexuality and female death. I need more words. I don't have the necessary ones. I know Sod's women ended up dead in his novels, but I feel that porn and popular culture in the West goes out of its way to show that sex and rape, although degrading, although painful, do not cause death. Correct me if I'm being naive here. Radical feminists have pointed out that intercourse, PIV, is dangerous to women because pregnancy, under patriarchy, is dangerous to women. Women lose their lives to pregnancy and childbirth all the time. So sex is not a benign activity. It also causes women to catch and die of diseases. Western, American, British, and German porn seems to try to attempt to minimize and invisibilize the harm. However, the message you get from Japanese porn is that female death is a beautiful and erotic thing to behold. I can't explain it. It's as though they go one step further. They're showing that the killing of a woman is poetry itself, pure art. The killing, therefore, should be done in a properly artistic way, as is fitting with the intellectual posturing that seems to go on in Japanese porn. We have the similar posturing from politicians and writers in the West who define porn as radical, edgy, and sometimes revolutionary. Dear men, there is nothing radical about hurting and degrading a politically and economically disenfranchised group of people. I've since learned that prestigious and famous Japanese artists, those who are celebrated in the public eye and who are shown in galleries around the world, have drawn pornographic pictures of women nearing death or dead. They date from the 19th century, but the artistic and creative practice of binding criminals with rope in order to torture them to death dates back further. Women, remember, have been regarded as criminals under the flimsiest of pretexts. Prostitutes are criminals by default. I went into the home of a man, European, who was involved in Japanese pornography. He had all kinds of paintings on the walls of his house, but there was one that I remember well because I just couldn't quite believe what I was looking at. The setting was Japan. It was a Japanese painter. Women were being brought on a ship by men to an island where the victims, all women, were being stripped naked, tortured, beheaded, and their heads were put on stakes. I kept staring at this painting because I just couldn't believe that such a huge and glorified piece of art from a renowned painter was showing what my eyes were telling me it was. Women being led to their death. But the hanging women are the worst. Artistic depictions of pregnant women hanging upside down, one dying while an old hag presides over her, women hanging, slowly dying, while men smoke, drink, and play cards in the corner of the room, old women hanging, women of ideal beauty hanging with their genitals on show, women orgasming while hanging, with a particular look on their faces that I now realize is supposed to depict the shame of being exposed coupled with sexual pleasure. And another one that stood out for me, a woman in a kimono with autumn leaves falling about her. Autumn leaves representing the beauty of her death. All the women are intricately bound into varying contortions and positions by rope, the tying and binding itself being classed as an art in its own right. These images are the inspiration for Japanese pornographers today. A popular image is women in snow. Seasons are important in Japan. I have seen images of women, real women, whose hands and feet are so cold that they are blue. Not only from the cold, but from the ropes which cut off their circulation. Photographers proudly take pictures of the damage the rope has caused on flesh. The images are easily Googleable. Real women, real rope, real trees, real snow. The genre has spread. It is popular now in the US, the UK, and Germany, as well as Eastern Europe. It is almost exclusively white women who are used in these countries, and pornography niche is driven by white men. In case anyone tries to romanticize this, I should mention that the degradation of women is absolute. Feces and enemas, designed to be as humiliating and disgusting as possible, are part and parcel of this style of pornography, both in the West and in Japan. There is nowhere left for this post to go because it's not an analysis, it's just a description of what I've seen, and a pondering on to what extent Japanese pornography affects Japanese women today. If I was to attempt to draw a conclusion, it might be that the clear link between female sexuality and death is absolutely terrifying for any woman who beholds the images commonly shown in Japanese porn. These images infer that no woman matters. A woman's death is less than meaningless, less than incidental. Daly talked of the banality of death under patriarchy. Death becomes banal when it happens too often, when life has been devalued too much, making it easily expendable. But you get another feeling when you see Japanese porn. Her death is banal, yes. Inevitable, yes. But you realize in the way the image lingers on the eroticism of her death that the slow death is there to be enjoyed in a sexual sense in all of its beauty. Dworkin wrote of how the photographs of Jewish women in the death camps upped the antes in terms of pornography, that they surpassed Saad's greatest dreams and expectations, but they are almost rivaled by Japanese porn. There is no sense of her childhood dreams having turned to dust, or that she is completely alone and in pain, or so that somebody might be waiting for her to come home. Because her death has surpassed even banality. On the contrary, she will remain pornography until her body finally decomposes in the ice. Comments. Mia XX says, I recently read about the Japanese comfort women in World War II. These women and girls were abducted from their homes and kept in military bases where they were raped repeatedly by the soldiers. A lot of them didn't survive. I wondered at the time what that would do to a generation, as the men who raped these women were then returning home after the war and on leave to their wives. Wondered what that would do to their sex lives and what expectations and practices those men would then bring back and inflict on an entire generation of women. Cherry Blossom Life says, yes, Japanese men are evil in war, so they must bring that mentality back to their country when they return home, mustn't they? You're probably right that their penchant for raping and killing women, that they developed in the early 20th century, has lasting repercussions in Japanese society. You could not compartmentalize something like that, could you? Mia XX said, all men are evil in war, and I expect all wars have a big impact on relations in the home, but I just found that the comfort women thing made me think. Cherry Blossom Life says, some man got to this post today by Googling women's slow death porn. I just want to draw people's attention to this blog called Men's Search Terms. What men want to see online.wordpress.com, she posts. Black Metal Valkyrie says, porn is evidence of men's sadism, even though we often project our humanity onto them. Delphine49 says, hi Cherry Blossom Life. I just watched a short video about self-harm by young women in Japan, and it made me think of this post. I had a mixed reaction to the video. One was that it was good that he was getting the story out about these young women. The other reaction was being disturbed by his inability to connect the dots between specific family violence and societal violence to these women, that both expressions of violence come from the same source. These young women are not isolated incidents. They are part of a much larger picture of violence towards women. Although I wish men would make those connections, I no longer think that they actually care about it. They'd rather leave it as a semi-conscious thought so that their privilege is maintained through unacknowledged violence. Or perhaps they just really like the violence. Either way, it leaves us women to cope any way we can and try to find the ibasio on our own, when what we, in my opinion, need to do is connect each of our ibasio with each other to create a stronger energy than patriarchy has had. I do believe that groups of women without men have much greater strength than any one man or group of men. That's why men don't like seeing us meeting without their involvement. I'm so happy to see you back as I really enjoy your posts. I'm rather new to radical feminism, having bumped into it last year at Gallus' place when she was forced offline. Peeling the scales off my eyes hasn't been easy or pleasant, but I'd rather see clearly than put those blinders back on. Cherry Blossom Life says, "Hi, Delphine49. Thanks for your comment. I watched the video clip you linked. I do think it's good that the issue is being brought up in Japan, but I found the photographer creepy. He has the kind of beguiling character that can lead women to their doom. I was not surprised to hear that one of the young women called him after slitting her wrists. Then he talked about ethics in journalism, and what he meant by that was his colleagues would have told him he should have let her bleed to death. His colleagues would have told him that he should have let her bleed to death for the sake of honest reporting and non-interference, quite forgetting that the very fact she had called him up was already evidence of his interference in her emotional life. I once watched a documentary-type program where a Canadian journalist went to Thailand. The entire documentary was based on one bar girl, and from the outset, the narrator set the scene by saying shit like, "She seemed different to all the others. I wondered what she was like under that demure exterior." He made out as though she was just a nice girl who happened to want to show him around Bangkok. Then he let it slip that he had paid her a bar fine, which is something men pay to the bar owner to relieve the bar girls of their bar duties for the evening. In other words, he paid for her. Often in these transactions, sex is expected of the bar girl and she is given gifts. He totally glossed over the payment and went on about how she and he got along well and blah blah blah. Well, as the documentary progressed, he began to say creepy shit like, "Although I trusted her, I had to wonder where she had got her gold necklace from." In other words, he was stringing her along, seducing her, and probably leading her to believe he was going to take her away from it all back to Canada. The final scene is shot on the corridor of her apartment block. She looked a scruffy mess. Hair unkempt, dirty t-shirt. What hadn't been mentioned or shown before was that she was missing a few fingers on one of her hands after a childhood accident. In other words, this foreign guy had shown interest in her, and as far as she was concerned, it was him or nothing. The documentary ended. Then a note was written at the end saying, 1 week after the documentary ended, she committed suicide. As though it was just one of those things that happened to bar women in Thailand and nothing whatsoever to do with the bastard who dropped her like a ton of bricks once he got his journalism footage. Cherry Blossom Life says, "But thanks for dropping the link because I'm glad I saw it and I'm glad women's suffering is being acknowledged in some way. I found the link to the doc called Bangkok Girl," and she posts a video. Ayako says, "The available scientific evidence doesn't support the argument that access to pornography leads to a higher incidence of sex crimes. See E.G. Milton Diamond and Ayako Uchiyama, Pornography, Rape, and Sex Crimes in Japan." Quote, "In sum, the concern that countries allowing pornography would show increased sex crime rates due to modeling, or that adolescents in particular would be negatively vulnerable to and receptive to such models, or the society would otherwise be adversely affected, has not been vindicated. It is certainly clear from our data and analysis that a massive increase in available pornography in Japan has been correlated with a dramatic decrease in sexual crimes, and most so among youngsters as perpetrators or victims." Cherry Blossom Life says, "This is not the right blog to defend pornography, Ayako. There are too many variables. For example, in countries where there's greater pornography, women might be less inclined to report sex crimes to police for fear of not being believed or of shame and ridicule. In countries with higher rates of porn consumption, there's a higher chance that the police and judge handling your case are porn watchers and therefore more inclined to believe the lies that pornography tells about women. Women aren't stupid. I didn't report what happened to me. Doesn't mean it didn't happen.